So the inquest into the death of Neil Agget is continuing today. Former Minister Barbara Hogan has been on the stand throughout the morning. Let's just cross to, of course, our reporter Aaron Bates, who is there to find out more information about what came out from that testimony. Aaron, good to have you and welcome to, of course, our bulletin. Let's start perhaps with what Barbara Hogan's testimony was all about today. What did she have to say in court?
Well, it's quite a lot to get through, quite dense evidence on the horrors of intimidation by security branch members. Barbara Hogan endured firsthand on her person in various locations, including, of course, John Vorster Square, and then also police cells in Vereeniging. We learnt about the different tactics that her interrogators would use to try and eke information out of Hogan. She says she simply did not have. The crux of her arrest, it seems, is a document called Close Comrades, which contained the list of 3 people very close to her who were understood to be involved directly with the ANC underground, which of course was illegal at the time of the arrest, but then also others who were close to her and could be vulnerable to arrest or scrutiny by the security branch because she knew them through union circles on the white political left in the 1980s. This document Hogan had compiled to send to the ANC High Command, but it seems it was intercepted, and that then precipitated not only her arrest, but the arrests of others on that document, including the likes of Dr. Neil Agget, who Hogan insists was never a member of the ANC, who ascribed to the values of the Freedom Charter, but who was more squarely involved in trade union structures, and we have heard about that before.
Now, Aaron, what did Barbara Hogan have to say about her personal experience, in detention at the John Vorster Square prison? I know that a lot of also former and ex-detainees documented the horrors that came out there. We also heard from Neil Agget's sister in the past narrating the state in which, of course, they had seen Neil Agget, also alluded to the fact that there were, push-ups and various stringent exercises that they were made to do in there.
Certainly, although what is interesting about the testimony of Agget's partner is that she, as a medical doctor, saw Agget's body and said there weren't signs of swelling on his body, for example, when she viewed it after he died in detention. But there's no doubt that the methods used by the security branch in John Vorster Square and elsewhere were profoundly inhumane, who were executed with the sole task of dehumanizing and breaking down detainees, specifically political detainees, and really amount to what could arguably the crimes of war. In Barbara Hogan's case, we heard about an instance where she was assaulted at a Vereeniging police cell. She says that a captain, I believe it was, used a wooden plank to hit her when she was at John Vorster Square. Things started off fairly measuredly. She said she was handcuffed to a heater, for example, or a chair. She would then be shouted at. She would be threatened with assault, but it didn't happen at first. It only came toward the end of 1981 during her detention at John Vorster that the assaults began. There she named the likes of Deetlefs and also Prince, both warrant officers at John Vorster Square, and said they were personally responsible for assaulting her, particularly in the first instance of assault she endured, Prince. And she said that she was hit in the back. She was also hit in the head. He used a hand which had a ring on it and threatened to actually burst her eardrums. And she said she endured internal bleeding and was then threatened by Deetlefs that if she told the district surgeon the following day that she had been assaulted, she would be taken out to the mines and killed.
And of course, with that said, let's just listen in what Barbara had to say.
It was principally Warrant Officer Prince and to a less extent Warrant Officer Deetlefs. They just came in, had me handcuffed, started screaming and shouting, telling me that I wasn't cooperating, and started shouting questions. I'd answer, they wouldn't listen, and Prince started hitting me on my back, across my face, for quite a period of time. I started bleeding internally, And at about 9 o'clock, they took me back to my cell.
Now, of course, Erin, just narrate to us what Barbara also had to say about Neil Agget.
Well, what was so sort of moving, I felt, in the final minutes of Hogan's testimony before the lunch adjournment was her reflection on a very sweet and short moment, really, between her and Dr. Neil Agget when they were both in detention. This is the last time, says former Minister Barbara Hogan, that she saw Neil Agget alive. Bear in mind, of course, that one of the reasons that Agget was arrested was because he was named by Hogan in that Close Comrades document she says she wishes she'd never written. And it was never intended, of course, for the security branch. She'd written it to give to the ANC on instructions to provide the names of people she was close to. What Hogan said about the last time she saw Dr. Agget, I thought was very delicate and so profound. She described going into a holding sort of room or office in one of the detention centres. It may have been John Vorster Square, although I stand corrected. And she said, to her surprise, Agget walked in accompanied by a handler. He then saw Hogan, smiled at her, she said, and raised his hand in the Amandla fist or salute. And Hogan said at that moment she noticed how tattered the cuffs of his shirt were, and that, she would later learn, was the last time she saw this close friend she knew through union circles alive.
All right, Erin Basewell, thank you so much for updating us on those developments within court.